as we go forward here, we will look a little bit more at the Reformation in part 2, and really how we see the Reformation spread after Martin Luther and the 95 Theses. So not only do we have Luther, but we start to see that this rebellion and this demand for reform really starts to take place in other locations around Europe as well. One of these locations takes place in Switzerland with Ulrich Zwingli, who is a Catholic priest, but decides that he is going to make reforms of his own. He abolishes the Catholic form of Mass. He gets rid of this idea of confessions, as well as the selling of indulgences in his church. So he gets rid of these things that were seen as problematic. And he also tries to mirror other ideas that Martin Luther had, such as letting priests marry. And again, these ideas are going to spread throughout Switzerland, just like Luther's ideas spread through Germany. You also have John Calvin, and John Calvin also was one of the key reformers of this time. His beliefs were a little bit different and rejected this idea that, hey, if you do good things on earth, you're going to get into heaven. That based on your actions, that's what determines whether or not you get salvation. He stresses more on this idea that God being, right, omnipotent, okay, this power, right, this powerfulness, this all-powerfulness, means that God gets to decide who receives eternal life. And this idea is what we call predestination, this idea that prior to anything, God has decided who will be saved and who will be not saved or damned in the afterlife. And because of this, because there's really nothing that you can do, according to Calvin, people should live lives where they live simply and modestly, they work hard, and they have grace for one another, knowing that there's not much that can change that outcome. And this is going to be very popular, especially in the Netherlands, as well as in northern France, where Calvin's followers are called Huguenots. Henry VIII is also an interesting figure when we look at the Reformation, mainly because of his origins. Henry VIII, he's the King of England at the time, and is considered to be a staunch defender of Catholicism. He goes so far as to publish documents, these attacks against Martin Luther when the 95 Theses comes out and what he sees taking place in Germany. He basically calls him out because of the threat that he is to the Catholic Church, as well as kind of the European order of that time. Because of this, the Pope calls Henry VIII the Defender of the Faith, which is a pretty lofty title to give to a king. So again, you can see his kind of relationship to religion in this sense. The only problem was that Henry habitually got remarried. He is famous or infamous because of his 6 different marriages that he has, and this first one is problematic mainly because his wife at the time, Catherine, they're not able to produce a son. And with the logic at the time being that it can't be the king's fault, it's got to be the wife's fault, he asks the Pope to grant him what's called an annulment. And an annulment is basically just a statement from a religious official that dissolves the marriage. So the marriage effectively did not happen. And this was something that he asked again because he thought that with another wife or another queen that he would be able to produce an heir. This is a really important thing at the time because having a male son as your heir was very important to the English line of succession. If there was a male son, it just made it very easy to then shift them as the next king or the crown prince. The problem comes because the Pope says no. So Henry, in his protest, he ends up getting the Parliament to vote basically to dissolve any power that the Pope has in England, so that they're not going to recognize the papacy and their power over the church moving forward. And what this really evolves into is solidified in 1559. Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I, who comes to power, she ends up solidifying the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, moving forward. And the Anglican Church still holds on to a lot of the kind of rituals of the Catholic Church, but does do some modernizations. They use an English translation of the Bible instead of a Latin one. They also allow their priests to marry. So we see these kind of changes moving forward. Elizabeth, though, is the head of the church, and this is going to continue moving forward, that each monarch in England will be not only the sovereign in terms of the ruler of England politically, but they're also going to be the ruler of the Anglican Church as well, now that England is a Protestant nation moving forward. So with all of these changes, you have to expect that there's going to be reactions to this. And this reactionary period is what we call the Catholic Reformation or the Counter-Reformation. And you'll learn more about that in part 3. So thanks again for listening and following along, and hope you dive back in for part 3.